Okay. So it looks like it is 5 o'clock. So work sessions are an opportunity for board members to discuss issues informally with staff and invited guests. The board encourages members of the public to attend work sessions and listen to the discussion, but there is generally no opportunity for public comment. Members of the public wishing to address the board are welcome to do so during the board's regularly scheduled meetings. It looks like we are going to start off with topic number 1, Ambulance Service Area Advisory, and that is found on page 3.
Commissioner Banks?
Yes.
Discuss the formal agenda.
Oh, look at that. I skipped the bold print, sorry. Yes.
Doesn't have a number, does it?
Is there any discussion on the formal agenda this evening? Okay, hearing none, then let's go ahead and move on to topic number 1, Ambulance Service Advisory Committee on page 3.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you. How's my sound?
A little low.
Is it a little low? Okay.
A little low.
How's
Jim
this?
is rushing to the rescue.
Okay. Well, I'll get started. Good evening, Commissioners. This is Tiffany Brown with Emergency Management. Tonight, we're before you to talk about 6 vacancies we have on the Ambulance Service Area Advisory Committee. 6 sounds like a lot of vacancies. 2 of these are new. 4 are either coming up or currently vacant. And I have to say that we've had vacancies over the years in the past, and we had a really amazing turnout for applications. We are reappointing Jill Tillotson, recommending that we reappoint Jill Tillotson to the nursing position. Brian Ellsbury and Kathy Gantz are appointed to the new positions that you approved at your meetings earlier this year for additional hospital and fire representative positions. And then the 3 remaining vacant positions are public positions. Do you have any questions?
Does anybody have any questions?
No, I don't think so.
No, there's no questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's go ahead and move on to topic number 2, ethics training on page 14. County Manager, are you leading that, or is County Council? County Council.
Thank you, Commissioner Bangs. Good evening, Board. Today I'm going to be doing a quick training on Oregon government ethics, and this overview is going to be pretty high level. We're going to go through a lot of material pretty quick to try to cover kind of encompass everything. But please, if you have any questions or concerns while we're going through, just let me know. I think we all can agree that ethics is, an important topic, especially at an individual level. Not only because this is, the right thing for us to do, but failure to follow the ethics laws could have you removed from office. You could face civil fines or even criminal charges. But on the global level, I think it's of the utmost importance for the community, especially for local government. If we don't have the trust of our citizens, we're not going to be effective. And by following these ethic rules, it helps us to keep in line and keep that trust. There we go. The Legislative Assembly declares that service as a public official is a public trust, and that as one safeguard for that trust, the people require all public officials to comply with the applicable provisions of this chapter. So the question becomes, who is a public official? Sorry, let me just skip through. I got ahead of myself here. A public official is any person who is serving the state of Oregon or any of its political subdivisions or any other public body as an elected official, an employee, agent, or otherwise, irrespective of whether the person is compensated for the service. So as members of the Board of Commissioners, you're elected, so obviously you would be public officials, all the staff and everybody who works for the county, and even those who are appointed to boards where they're not compensated, are required to follow these ethic rules. So what we're going to do really quick, kind of go over the main topics that are covered under the ethics law. We're not going to go into all these in detail, but if you have any questions, just let me know. Prohibitive use of office we're going to talk about, and that's basically using your position within the government for financial gain. We'll go into in depth in that in just a second. Another one very important for the board is conflicts of interest, and this is where you as members, if you're making a vote for a contract or another agreement, if you're going to personally benefit from it or somebody in your family, there's some steps that we'd have to take, and we'll go into that in detail also. Gifts, this is an important one, which we'll also talk about, and even though there are times when it's acceptable for the board to receive gifts, it's kind of a tricky territory, so we're going to talk a little bit about that too in a bit. These are some that we aren't going to go into detail. Nepotism is pretty simple. A public official can't have a relative working under them in the power or in the organizational chart, or you can't be supervised by somebody in your family. Outside employment, we're not going to go into great detail. Obviously, as members of the board and even as employees of the county, you are allowed to have outside employment, but it can't conflict with the county or work against it. There's subsequent employment, and we will talk about this a little bit, but as board members, you can't use your current position to try to leverage a future job afterwards. And there may be certain information that's confidential that you might deal with in the scope of your work, and obviously afterwards you still can't use that confidential information. There's a statement of economic interest. I think all of you should be aware of this. I think it was due on April 15th, so hopefully everybody filled that out. But basically this is where elected officials declare where they get their money, where their money is invested, so that kind of help us to make sure there's no conflicts going on. This is the last thing we'll talk about in depth today is political activities, what's allowed by the board, what's allowed by the county employees, and then of course there's some restrictions about having elected officials use county employees to help with political topics. It's not allowed while they're on work hours. And we're not going to talk about this, but it also encompasses executive session and public meetings law. So we'll start to go into a little more detail. As public officials, you cannot use your public position for financial gain or avoidance of a loss. And I think that second part, avoidance of a loss, is one that people overlook. So it's just not about making money off of the county assets, but it's also if you can find a way to save money. And since you guys are not part-time volunteer, you don't have access to a lot of the county. I mean, you guys couldn't go down and grab a truck and use it for something or equipment. So that's something that we worry about for employees, but there still is the opportunity for you to use, county assets for these things, and that's not allowed. Promise of future employment. I think actually we're going to talk about these in detail. I kind of got ahead of myself again, sorry. And this last one is that you can't use confidential information gained through public office for your personal gain. And I underlined confidential there because that's the important one. As an example, if you were to learn something in an executive session, trying to think of a good example, but maybe the Army was going to build a new naval base there at Tongue Point, and it wasn't general knowledge, and you went out there and bought a bunch of land around it knowing that it was increasing value. That obviously is not allowed. If you were to gain this information in a public meeting, though, there's not that restriction, and you can use anything that's available to the general public. Like I said, I got a little bit ahead of myself, so once again, you can't use the office for financial gain or to avoid that financial detriment. It's important to know that this isn't just for yourselves, but this is also for relatives or family members. In the next slide, we'll kind of go through and identify those. That's important also because that definition applies when we get to the conflict of interest a little bit later. And I think this one is important. It doesn't matter how minimal the financial gain or avoidance is, it's still an ethics violation. Of course, there may be different penalties for something more major than minor. And it's also important to point out that the county doesn't have to necessarily suffer any detriment. If the county doesn't lose money, it doesn't mean you can still use it for your gain. And this is just kind of a quick rule that you can use if you ever find yourself in a situation where you're not sure if what you're doing is allowed or not. It's the but-for rule. if the gain or avoidance of detriment would not otherwise be available but for the public official's holding of his or her office or position. So basically, if you're in a situation, you can just kind of do a quick, thought. If there's the same benefit available to the general public, if it is, then you're probably okay. If it's something that's just because of your role as a commissioner, and then there's a good chance that it's probably not something you're going to want to think about and look into. So as I mentioned, this is the definition of relative. I guess I can read through them real quick. Spouse, child or child-in-law, parents and step-parents, siblings and step-siblings, same members of the officials, in-laws, so father-in-law, sister-in-law, anyone from whom the public official has legal support obligation, anyone receiving benefits of the public official's public employment, and or anyone from whom the public official receives a benefit of employment. A member of the household is pretty simple. If somebody lives with you, they're a member of your household. So there are some exceptions to what is financial gain. This one's, I think, pretty obvious. It's the official compensation package, shows employees our salaries and benefits. For the board, your stipend. I guess it's important to know that sometimes there are kind of what we call fringe benefits worked in. For instance, as part of my employment contract, the county pays my state bar dues, and that's, of course, allowed because it's part of my compensation. You can also, of course, be reimbursed for approved travel expenses or other expenses. And if you get any unsolicited awards for professional achievement, Commissioner of the Year or something, that's all right.
I'm waiting for it.
Okay. And then certain gifts. And we don't have enough time to really go into detail. The ORSs allow for you to receive a $50 gift from each individual, even if they are have a legislative or administrative interest in what you're doing. But this is one of those things that I think is tricky, and just because something may be legally ethical, there could be questions about, if it is, I guess, proper. For instance, if somebody was coming before the board, if they're appealing a planning decision, technically they could come in before the meeting, hand you each a $50 Starbucks card, and then sit down and go through the hearings. Technically that's legal, but obviously the optics, and it's something that, I would try to avoid. So my request is if you do receive any gifts or you have any questions, definitely reach out to me first so we can talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Commissioner Thompson?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Banks. Well, Commissioner Yamamoto invited us to a working watershed group down in Tillamook, and he had swag bags for us. And I had one for my colleagues and myself, and I said, well, David, how much is this worth? And he said, less than $50. I mean, if it comes from another commissioner in that kind of a context, because it's a nice way to say welcome to the event.
And that would probably be allowed because, really the restriction comes to people who your vote could influence. And I don't know that commissioner, I know who he is, but I don't know if he had business interest here or things like that, then there would be more of a concern. Otherwise, it's really not an issue. So it's mostly people who are going to try to influence you. That would be the kind of the test there.
Well, he is trying to influence us to think Tillamook is better than we are.
Any other questions before we move forward? We'll just be really quick with this one. A public official may not solicit or receive either directly or indirectly, and a person may not offer or give to any public official any pledge or promise of future employment based on any understanding that the vote, official action, or judgment of the public official will be influenced by the pledge or promise. And so I think kind of just to differentiate after you're done being commissioners, or if you wanted to be being a commissioner put on your resume or talk about job experience, that's fine. That's not what this is talking about. This is talk about dealing with somebody who's trying to get you to do something now with a future promise of employment. That's kind of straightforward. Any questions there? Or? And we're going to go into conflicts of interest. A conflict of interest is participation in an official action that would or could result in a financial benefit to the public official, a relative, or business in which either are associated. And trying to keep this relatively short. I didn't go through and make slides for the definitions of those. I kind of wish I would have now. We talked about a relative. The business is a little more broad. It could be a business that you own, a business that you work for, of course, a business that your family members own or work for. And it could even be like a nonprofit or any other organization that you basically receive a salary or benefits from that you have to be careful. There's two types of conflicts when it comes to conflicts of interest. There's the potential conflict, and this is when the action taken by the public official could have a financial impact on the official, relative, or business. And then there's an actual conflict, is basically the same thing, but it's more definite that this will have impact on your the official, relative, or business. Any questions with those, or pretty straightforward? So each of these, they both have a different action that's required if you come across it. With the potential conflicts of interest, the public official must announce or disclose the conflict. If it's an actual conflict of interest, not only must you announce and disclose it, but you also have to recuse yourself from any votes on it. And this is basically how you announce it. You just have to publicly announce the nature of the conflict in the meeting, before the vote. This is more on Teresa's side, but she has to note that it was recorded in the records. And the announcement of the conflict must be made at each meeting or on each occasion the issue is discussed or debated, so you can't just announce it once when you're first elected and then not bring it up every time.
Commissioner Thompson?
Well, you're probably going to get into this, but there's the whole issue of if I take an action or a vote or make statements about issues in my neighborhood, for example. For some people, that means I have a conflict of interest because I have an opinion. But I'm trusting that that's not the same thing.
No, that's not the case. Otherwise, I don't think there's anything that the Board of Commissioners could vote on because it's all county related. And I don't have a slide for that, but I'm glad you brought that up. One of the exclusions to this is called if you're within a class. So if the vote affects a large group of people, then you're probably most likely going to be okay. So people, the county. The same thing is like if you had a relative working for the county, if you were to, vote for their pay raise, that would be a huge conflict. But if you're, doing a cost of living adjustment for all the employees in the county, it's not specific to them, it's not so much of an issue. So yeah, definitely, just because you live in the neighborhood or the area, definitely no conflicts. If there was a vote, some sort of planning vote about your specific property or even 2 or 3 properties you're involved in, that would be more of a problem. This is one of the key things here. What do you do if you think you may have a conflict of interest? Give me a call and we can talk about it and figure out what the next steps will be. We're going to kind of move on there. Like I said, I know we're moving pretty quick here. Any questions or concerns?
Commissioner West has a question.
I do. I'm always nervous about ex parte discussions. Are you going to talk about that in the future?
I don't have anything in this presentation, but we can talk about it. What specifically are you, type of situations are you concerned about?
Especially in a community like ours where we know so many people and we talk to people and we once someone files a lawsuit, I know what to do. I know to shut up. And which I didn't realize was going to be as personal as it is in this community. I mean, people come up to me in church and ask me questions, and I have to say, I'm sorry, I can't comment about this. But in general, often leading up to decisions that we make, we talk to other people, we talk to people about it. And I never know to what extent we, I guess in land use decisions, I'm pretty clear because that's what I know. But are there other cases when we shouldn't be talking to, if we know that something is about to be under consideration, and they have questions about it, and, that's...
I would say, as long as there's nothing, confidential that that you're not supposed to talk about, there's really no restrictions on what you talk to the citizens about. If there was pending litigation or we thought a lawsuit was coming, that's something that I would maybe be a little more concerned about. But for the most part, I think that's, kind of part of your job as commissioners is to talk to people. And as long as it's not something, that, like I said, that's confidential, I think there's really no restrictions.
Chair Banks, members of the board, I agree, with, county council. Short of, formal land use hearings, where you're hearing an appeal on the record and those types of things, ex parte contact would not be suitable, and obviously in any kind of a legal situation that the county is in or confidential. But beyond that, by design, elected officials are accessing the opinions of their constituents and they're hearing it whether they solicit them or not. And so that's all fair game. And I think that what it really comes down to is just, what are the expectations within commissioners on kind of how that contact happens, meaning.
That's the hard part.
Yeah, meaning because, here, obviously, we have district commissioners, and sometimes, as soon as, and people know people from all districts. This is a small community, and so, but it can get a little bit more, challenging between districts and being an ear and then how much weight. But, part of what our goal is to have really, extensive community engagement processes so the board's hearing from a wide breadth of the community. And then the board's job, obviously, is to balance all of the input that you're hearing and make decisions. But there's nothing that would prohibit your board from having contact. I think it's just the agreements amongst your board members about how you're going to do that as a governing board of 5. So.
Oh, you're introducing a whole new thought to this.
Well, it's really not anything new. It's just that, how board members navigate each other as they're receiving, input, is just always kind of a challenge. It's an opportunity and a challenge. Because as we know, some issues are very local, and but there's 5 board members that are going to make decisions even at the local level. And so I just think this is where how the board governs and the communication that exists between board members is really important, so that everybody is communicating as they are in the community. I think communication with the public is really important, but communication between board members is really important as you're receiving all that feedback. And so all I'm really saying is more of a governance issue, but the board's, welcome to communicate with citizens as long as it doesn't fall into the kind of quasi-judicial roles and then, legal roles. So, and that's really kind of what the board rules and other things kind of chart out, is how all that comes together so that the board can still govern. So, is that helpful at all?
Now I'm really confused. It's just that it's unfortunate that we have so few opportunities to really, I think I can remember when I first came on the board saying, don't ever hit reply all. And I've never quite understood,
Well, I can explain some of that if you don't mind. Yeah. So, one of the things that the governing boards have to be kind of concerned about is having a serial meeting. So, because serial meetings are not noticed and we don't allow for really visibility on them. And so what we do is that when we communicate, like when I communicate with the board, I'll say, just respond to me directly, because if you respond to me, no other board members have any visibility on how you're thinking, and you're not influencing them outside of the public sphere. Any 2 board members can talk, but if those 2 board members talk and then there's a serial meeting by sharing what each board member says to subsequent board members, then that would be more of a serial meeting, which isn't okay, because Oregon statutes really assume that the public work of decision-making will happen in a public forum. And so it doesn't mean you can't talk to each other, but it couldn't be in 3s, you can do it in twos, but then you can't have a serial meeting where you're communicating what everybody else thinks down the line.
I mean, I hear from other commissioners, most of whom, of course, in the state are three, about how taxing this is on their abilities to communicate with each other and how challenging it is.
Yeah, the three-commissioner model is way more challenging because you can't speak to another commissioner.
Yeah,
I
basically.
mean, so that makes it a lot more
Crazy.
challenging. Under ours with 5, 2 can speak. The biggest challenge or the biggest sensitivity is just not to share down the line so that so the fifth person knows how everybody else is thinking. So that's what we have to be cautious about, so. Did I miss anything?
Can we go down this rabbit trail a little more? 'Cause I remember right after, I was coming on, here comes the Handy decision, and, the commissioner from Lane County we used to call Pistol Pete, there was such a clear violation of the spirit of the public meetings law that the judge was outraged and fined him $20,000 out of his own pocket. I mean, that wasn't just a no, that was an emphatic no. You know better than this, and you did it anyway. You evaded the spirit and the letter of the law by deliberating outside, because they were calling to each other down the hallway. Fascinating, wasn't it? So that balance, though, between having a more informal, free-ranging discussion where we explore each other's values or intentions, or a little more, I want to say, open and informal. I think our work sessions are intended to be the place where that happens. They're recorded, they're broadcast over the internet. There's no right to privacy when it comes to us. On the other hand, sometimes I think or talk in ways that I really don't want to share over the internet because my truck driver language can emerge, for example. You know what I mean? It's just not the public persona I want to have. Well, I know the people who know me know this is true. So how do we get down to it? I think we've had board retreats at some points. I think those are useful because when it comes right down to it, it's the relationships that we have with each other as individuals and as a body, and it takes trust and being willing to be wrong. Now, that's easier in a less public situation. It can never be secret, but it can be less private. So how do we have as comfortable and informal and legal a way of deliberating with each other? And I didn't ask to have that in the strategic planning document, but I think it's part of how a healthy board and a healthy group, we kind of let down our hair a little. And yet there are people, okay, so story time. I was on the planning commission and I listed my house with the chair of the Board of Commissioners because I was thinking, my neighbors aren't friendly enough, I should go somewhere else, and that was a long time ago. I ultimately decided not to, but I had an ethics complaint filed against me, accusing me of a conflict of interest. That didn't go anywhere, but it was extremely troublesome. I still have a fat file folder on it. That same person who made that complaint, who filed that official complaint with the Ethics Commission, appeared to testify the first couple of board meetings where I was a sworn commissioner, claiming I was doing something that was a conflict of interest with wetlands. I mean, people can make up stuff and use this as, I don't know how to say it, use this in a way I don't think that honors the spirit and the letter of the law. So to the extent that staff can help us navigate and have some informal and still legal so that we can build trust and work out any differences of opinion that we have, I think that would serve us well, because we are going to have differences, and it's how we deal with those differences that determines how much integrity we have and how much effectiveness we have as a body.
No,
It was all relevant. Commissioner Webb?
I mean, we did, several years ago when we had some conflicts on the board, we were allowed, and I don't know what the process was, but we were allowed to take a full board retreat with a third party in the room with us. Under what auspices does that happen? No,
I mean, that typically happens just under the normal public meeting laws, and so we just notice it, and you have a meeting, you have a consultant or a facilitator in the meeting, and you just talk about what the issues are. Some of them obviously can be interpersonal, sometimes it's about the priorities of the county or specific issues. I've been through a lot of retreats at the board level since I've been doing this, and, you know, they're all agenda-driven and sometimes with consultants and working through future issues, current issues, past issues sometimes. And so, you know, that's all fair game. And how the board governs is something that boards tend not to spend enough time on. That's one of the reasons why we do spend time within work sessions, and, you know, but there's an art to having work sessions, and, you know, it's not really our intention just to provide information, it's to allow the board to also talk, and talk with staff in a more informal setting. And so, so that's what the goals are, and that could be retreats, it can be just work sessions, like we had kind of a retreat for the strategic plan, so it's still a work session, but a retreat. There's nothing special about a retreat per se. It's just a different format. You can have it outside the county buildings. You can have it, you know, less formal.
but technically, the public could still access it?
Yes. There's very little that the board can do without noticing as a public meeting, short of things that would otherwise be appropriate for an executive session. So if it's appropriate for an executive session, doesn't mean that there won't be press in the room, but it would be limited just to the board and to the appropriate staff.
And I would always just be the voice of caution in regards to retreats, because I've seen boards who have been on retreats, who have then had things that they said within the retreat circle back to them in public meetings, and that would be the Board of Forestry as an example.
Say more about that, please.
I
Probably don't want to say more about that.
it would be me who circled back and had a conversation regarding it. So it's just anything that is said within a retreat format or public meeting format can still be addressed by the public and heard by the public.
So maybe we were having so much fun when we were having our, I would say, a period of high conflict on the board. Nobody wanted to come and listen to what we had to say. There was that, because we did not have any company for that one. But the caution is,
Well, just so the board knows, I mean, I think, you know, certainly staff supports whatever type of meeting and whatever agenda the board, you know, supports. You know, we've made a number of changes to how we work both the actual meeting and the work session. And, you know, staff's just here to serve the board and serve your governance process. And so as you think about what we might be able to do to kind of help that, just let us know. So.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right.
Good discussion.
It's a good discussion, yeah. Move on to our last topic here, work.
I will
Try.
say the Ethics Commission,
Try.
when there were these other things, they said, you have to call us. We don't care if you talk to your county council. You have to call us. So I hope you're going to tell us to call us.
Sure.
They're awfully particular.
I mean, my 2 cents, if I might, board members, is if you have anything, I would start with county council and keep it, you know, just benefit from your attorney's advice and counsel, and then certainly the ethics commission has additional resources, but
And they do have, I can reach out to them and they can give, advice. And so that's what I've done in the past, and that's, we can kind of keep, names out of it and just give a fact pattern that can help. So we're going to shift gears. I think we're going to talk about elections and politicking, like, how would you say that?
Politicking?
Politicking, yeah.
You can say that if you want.
Okay, we'll go with that for now. And this is especially important with the election coming up. And one of the main things I want to get out of this section is there is different rules that apply to you as elected officials as opposed to staff. And so this first, it's a lot of words here, but this only applies to the county employees. And I'm just going to kind of read part of it here about what we're not allowed to do. It says, no public employee shall solicit any money, influence, service, or other thing of value, or otherwise promote or oppose any political committee, or promote or oppose the nomination or election of a candidate, the gathering of signatures on an initiative, referendum, or recall petition, the adoption of a measure, or the recall of a public office holder while on the job during working hours. However, this section does not restrict the right of the public employee to express personal political views. It is therefore the policy of the state and of your public employer that you may engage in political activity except on the extent prohibited by state law when on the job during working hours. So that is a lot of words, but it's basically saying just as the county must remain neutral through elections, county employees, while on the clock, also must remain neutral. And like most of the time, this is pretty easy, but sometimes it can get tricky, especially when you have kind of political charged measures, as with the SDRs. And really, it's pretty simple. When you're on duty, you can't do anything or use county resources. After hours, you're obviously free to engage in political activities. You just have to make sure that it's apparent to everyone that you're not representing the county.
Well, and I would just say that I have to work under completely different rules because of my professional ethics, and so I have a whole different rule set that I have to be neutral and objective, and I don't even get to participate outside of work. So just sharing that some of us even have different standards that we have to work by.
But this next slide is directed to you. This is the restrictions that are placed on elected officials. Elected officials may advocate a political position at any time. So that could be in board meetings while you're walking around the county, just pretty much it's free. There's no restrictions. That's because elected officials are not considered public employees. You can perform a campaign activity at any time. And this is the part that I think is really important, is however you must use caution not to involve any public employee's work time to do so. And I think obviously if you're running for re-election, you're not going to go to the county and ask them to help you get re-elected. Where I can see problems arising is, as I just mentioned, the STR issue. If one of the commissioners had a view if it should pass or not, if they came to Don or me and asked us to write them a letter or a speech or somehow help them to get the message out that, referendum shouldn't or should pass, that becomes, an issue. You can kind of just skip over this next slide. There's a lot of information here if you want to read, but this is kind of more direct towards public employees and exactly what they can and can't do. But like I said, we can just kind of summarize it that basically they can't help, push or support any political view while on county time. So that is the end of our presentation. Don, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think that's pretty self-explanatory probably, so. But I think if you have any questions, we're here to answer them or have a conversation if you'd like, so.
Does anybody have any discussion or questions? No?
I just say, if there is any other topics that you'd like, more in-depth training about or any questions, just reach out to me and we can work on that.
Great. Thank you, County Council. We have an executive session this evening, correct?
Yes, and we can do that right after the regular session if you would like. I don't think the regular session will last very long, so hopefully we can just do it then.
Okay,
So
board?
that'll give you a few minutes to relax before the meeting, so.
Thank you.
All right, we're ready to go. The Board of Commissioners, as the governing body of Clatsop County, all county service districts for which this body so acts, and as the Clatsop County Local Contract Review Board, is now meeting in regular session. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk of the Board, can we have a roll call?
Chair Quila,
Here?
Vice Chair Banks,
Here.
Commissioner Toyoka,
Here.
Commissioner Webb,
Here?
Commissioner Thompson.
Here.
I know we had an opportunity to review the agenda during the work session. Any comments, questions? Do we have a motion?
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All those in favor signify with an aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. First item is a proclamation for Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month on page 15 of our agenda, and Maria Warren. Welcome, Maria.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Maria. I work at Columbia Memorial Hospital in the ICU department. I am a member of the Filipino American Association of Clatsop County. It's a small organization of Filipino American citizens around the county. There's about 50 people or less. Members used to be like the older Filipinos that lived here, worked in the canneries and all that. Some of them have passed away. Some has also transferred to another state or anything like that. But anyways, there's 50 people and less of us, but we're kind of working on getting a few more members, and our goal is to have community outreach projects to help the bigger community in the long run. But I'm proud to be here and present our little Filipino community.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And yes, we hope your numbers grow. Yes.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for being here.
Thanks.
Good to see you. Do we have a motion?
I move to approve the proclamation.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the resolution in order proclaiming May 2023 as Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and authorize the chair to read then sign the proclamation. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. And I'll go ahead and read the proclamation, Maria. The matter of proclaiming the period of May 1st, 2023 through May 31st, 2023 to be Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Whereas Asian and Pacific Islander Americans today represent vastly diverse ethnic groups, including individuals who immigrated to the United States or whose ancestors originated from the continent of Asia and the numerous Pacific islands known as Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia. And whereas for more than 200 years, Oregon and its history, economy, and culture have benefited from the skills, talents, and strengths of Asians and Pacific Islanders who have lived and worked in Oregon. And whereas in the early 1800s, trade vessels that brought Kanaka Maoli, native Hawaiians, to Astoria, they worked as laborers and boat builders. Kanaka were often treated poorly in the fur trade, even though their contributions to the industry caused locals to highly value their continued migration to the area. As a result, there was a significant population of native Hawaiians throughout the Pacific Northwest during this time. And whereas Chinese immigrants first came to Oregon in the late 1850s, by the 1880s, Astoria had 13 Chinese residents. A decade later, that number grew to 2,317 residents of Chinese descent, accounting for a full one-third of Clatsop County's population. And whereas continued labor demands in the early 1900s led to an increase of immigrants from Japan and the Punjab region of the Indian subcontinent to Clatsop County. And whereas the local Punjabi community was instrumental in the formation of the Gutter Party, an international organization dedicated to Indian independence from Britain. They conducted their foundational meeting at Astoria's Finnish Socialist Hall on May 30th, 1913. And whereas for generations, individuals of Asian and Pacific Islander descent have courageously strived to bring their hopes and dreams to life and forged a proud legacy, often in the face of severe racial bias, discrimination, and legislation. And whereas the vibrant history and diverse cultures of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders residing in Clatsop County are to be honored and respected as a central part of our community's story. Now, therefore, be it hereby resolved that the Clatsop County Board of Commissioners does hereby proclaim May 1st, 2023 through May 31st, 2023 as Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month in Clatsop County and encourages all members of the community to join in this observance and celebration, honoring the history and contributions of people of Asia and Pacific Islander descent. Dated this 26th day of April, 2023, Clatsop County Board of Commissioners. Thank you, Maria.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for being here.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chair, may I?
Yes, Commissioner Thompson.
You know, I think our proclamations, the quality, the historical context, the richness of them have really improved dramatically since we have our public affairs staffer. And I'd just like to give a shout out to Patty Jo Angelini for the caliber of the recognition that we're offering. I really appreciate it.
I agree. Very thorough and very informative and emotional and moving as well. So thank you so much.
This was a wonderful one. I loved the history in it.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Very well done. Next item is business from the public. This is an opportunity for anyone to give a 2-minute presentation about any item on the agenda except for public hearings or any topic of county concern that is not on the agenda. Clerk of the Board, are there any members of the public signed up to speak remotely?
No, there are not.
Okay. So we'll start with folks that are here in chambers, and first is Mike Martin. And Mike, if you just could state your name and address for the record.
Mike Martin, 646 16th Street, Clatsop Care Health District.
Okay, go ahead.
A little over 40 years ago, Clatsop Care Health District was formed by this community, to provide services for our aging population. The idea that our family, friends, and neighbors did not have to go to Portland, Longview for services and housing and be closer to home. Since then, Clatsop Care has grown to employ 147 people and provide services to around 200 to 250 people in the area monthly, and it's growing. These services have expanded to include skilled nursing, the only skilled nursing facility in the area, long-term and short-term rehabilitation, in-home care, assisted living at a retirement village, and a memory community for those with dementia and Alzheimer's. You would be hard-pressed to talk to someone in this community that hasn't had someone at one of our facilities or has not used our services. Yet people still don't know that we're all one entity. They think primarily we're the care center. Special districts, when they get set up, get subsidies, not only from their operating revenue, but also from tax levies, donations, and grants. One particular levy is established from property taxes and is up for renewal on May 16th ballot. It is a midterm election, so we need as much participation as possible to gain the simple majority. This operational tax has always provided much-needed funds for key technology and infrastructure that allows us to provide the type and quality of care the community expects. The levy renewal or extension is called Measure 4223. There is no increase in the percentage of how the tax is calculated. In the past, these funds have provided things like new phone systems, software, computer systems, and as well as nursing call upgrade systems. In addition to this, it has allowed us to get a new bus and take people out more often, replace siding and weather stripping at the retirement village, and recently we had to replace elevators at our retirement village, which just happened to quit one day.
Wow.
We also purchased much-needed new Hoyer lifts, which allow us to safely transfer residents and clients. We're asking you to vote yes on Measure 4223 on May 16th, so that we can continue to provide items like new windows at the care center, a new interior refresh at the retirement village, and new software for our in-home care services. One of the biggest things is that we've begun to look for a location and have started to work with engineers, realtors, architects in hopes of building a new care center for the health and rehabilitation, our skilled nursing facility. To learn more about that, you can go to clatsupcare.org. I also brought some literature here that I'll leave on the table. And I can always put signs in yards if you haven't seen them coming around. Let me know, and tell your families and neighbors and friends that, you know, in midterms, a lot of times they'll just vote no because they don't know the issue. So encourage them to vote yes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. I'm so glad you're here tonight, and thank you for the literature. I definitely will take a sign. I know that, like you just mentioned, so many people are touched by each one of the facilities or in-home care. My family's touched by it right
didn't
now.
realize that,
So
no.
we, both Clatsop In-Home Care and Clatsop Retirement Village. So it's just so important to support this measure. Vote yes on 4-223. And certainly, thank you for being here.
Great.
And thank you for all you do and for everybody that the caregivers did, all that the caregivers do in all of these facilities. Commissioner Banks.
I was just wanting to interject. I was wondering if, as a county or through our media, if we could help define for folks the difference between a levy and a bond and what a levy means to our community. I know that there's a lot of confusion, as you noted, regarding the difference between a levy and a bond. And so I think if we can do something either just within our social media to describe the differences so that they also understand that this is not an increase in their taxes.
Yep.
Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
I think that's perfectly within our bounds to just provide information so that people know. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Next is Rick Bowers. Rick?
Rick Bowers, 357 Commercial Street here in Astoria. The 2019 Clatsop County...
No, that was fast.
Wow, that was fast.
Didn't even get to say anything.
Sorry about that.
The 2019 Clatsop County Housing Strategy Report slide in front of you has a chart in the upper left showing the years through 2040 with the population information provided by Portland State University's Population Research Center. There are two circled items on the chart that point to data showing the population increase that was forecasted for 2038 was reached last year. To say it differently, 3 years after the 2019 study was published, we had exceeded the 20-year population forecast. Based on this population forecast, the consultants predicted 1,500 new housing units would be needed by 2038. I suppose that means we need the housing today. So on to the next slide, on the flip side. With ongoing unreliable housing forecasts across Oregon, a consulting firm was hired to coordinate developing a new forecasting methodology. In March of 2021, they produced an almost 600-page report outlining their new proposed methodology. The tables you see document additional housing that is needed by varying income levels throughout the county. The tables are pulled from the 2021 report. The total is 4,295 additional housing units will be needed by 2040. That's almost 3 times the number of units the 2019 Clatsop County Housing Study predicted. That would mean building the equivalent of about 4.3 of the new proposed Owens-Adair 50-unit apartment buildings every year over the next 20 years throughout the county. As I understand it, this proposed methodology is part of House Bill 2001 that has been signed into law and House Bill 2889 that is currently in the Senate. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Clerk of the board, do we have anybody else?
Nope, that's all.
Okay. Anyone else here want to participate in public comment? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to the consent calendar. We have 7 items on the consent calendar. Any questions, comments? Okay, do we have a motion? Oh, Commissioner Toyoka.
Just one comment, honestly, on the item 7 bulk fuel purchase. Just as an advocate for our, Public Works Department, if you look at that program, it's, budget-wise, it's a saver for the county, big time. It extends the life of the roads, and so I applaud them in their application of, looking outside of just the normal maintenance cycles, but looking to these avenues to provide good roads and at the same time preserve the budget. So I just wanted to, say thank you for the Public Works Department for that, because that is seemingly very small line item, but it is a big consequence to us here in the county.
Yeah. Good comment, Commissioner Toyoka. Anything else? Okay.
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. We'll go on to commissioner reports. We'll start with Commissioner Toyoka.
I used to go last.
Yeah, well, mixing it up.
Mixing it up a little. One thing I've been discussing with county manager and county council is, not to be redundant on myself, but our legislators in Salem on this Measure 114. County council has done more research, and it's about gun control measures. Basically they want to remove 114 that was passed by the people, replace it with a different version. And again, I don't care where you sit on gun control. To me, the issue isn't yes or no on this one. The real issue is that they're prohibiting where the opposition can be held. Basically, it can only be seen in one court that is favorable to their agenda or the Salem's agenda. I think that is a very dangerous precedent and one that we should oppose, not as just a board of commissioners, but as a community. It takes away the voice of the people. It takes away the voice of anyone outside of that center of influence. So again, I think if they are able to do this and restrict any opposition to a measure or a bill to a singular court, I think that's dangerous, and it's a precedent we should oppose. That's one thing, and hopefully bring up some awareness to the board and to the people that is happening, and we, as a community, need to oppose that.
Yeah.
Secondly, on a much lighter note, happier, I'm glad you're here tonight. Your presence at the regional housing meetings is always appreciated, because you bring facts, figures, and always say, stabilizing force as far as in terms of what is on the ground here today and what we're trying to achieve. And the nice thing that we realize is not just one form of housing we need to work on here in Clatsop County. And it must be a regional solution. It can't be individual cities, individual projects. Projects make up a bigger part of the solution, but it has to have that broad approach of, every form of housing along the way. So if somebody isn't stuck in transitional, in supportive housing, there is a next step to go to. And it keeps them on a path of, basically moving from one phase to another to get to a better home, better housing, better life. And that's the path we all want to see. And so I appreciate your thoughts and presence and input into those meetings as well to help us on that path. So,
yeah,
okay,
great.
At that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Toyoka. Commissioner Webb?
Thank you. I just shared with my colleagues something that I value very much. The workforce, the entity is NOW, Northwest Oregon Workforce Board. We are meeting in Tillamook actually in a couple of days, and Eric Noder, who is the regional economist for, I think it's these 5 counties, it's kind of Northwest Oregon, does a wonderful job of presenting statistics specifically related to employment. And I like the fact that he always gives his data by county and in comparisons, and I think it's a wonderful example. And I've mentioned to the county manager that if you all would like Eric to come here periodically and give us a report, it's much wider than just employment. And I think it's really valuable. I mean, he usually spends 15 or 20 minutes at our NOW meetings, and he's really insightful. He's been at this a long time. The other good news is, and I'll have more specifics for you, is that the workforce funding is really flowing nicely from the federal government, and we've got money coming into Clatsop County that I'll be able to be real specific about at our next meeting. And I think, as I say, I think I mentioned before that now that I'm on the ambulance committee, I've already spoken with our county manager about all the issues that they're facing right now, which were headlined actually in the newspaper. And there are several of their issues, one of which, of course, is the fact that we have 2 911 centers in the county, which our sheriff is working on tirelessly, and is, I think, really needs to be a priority for our board. The second one is, of course, the issue that they're having a terrible time getting volunteers, and I think I've thought a little bit about the issue of maybe appealing to some of, I don't know what their minimum age is, but going maybe to the community college, or I just think this is something that maybe we as a county could do a little bit more talking about, looking straight at PJ. Because it's a tremendous need in the community, and I think over the course of events, I can remember in my city planning history classes, the fact that and it's especially relevant here, where 100 years ago, a fire almost destroyed the whole town. There really aren't a lot of fires anymore. That housing construction and other issues have really broken down. But our fire departments have assumed all kinds of other responsibilities. I mean, they do, they do explorations and construction. They do inspections, and they do a tremendous amount of emergency management. And that is one of their biggest needs, is for people who are trained at different levels of service. And after speaking especially with the folks when the Lewis and Clark folks were in my district, they are often the only contact that people in rural areas have, especially older people. And I've had, one of their EMTs said to me one time, I wish there were something I could leave behind after a call. I wish there were a reference, for instance, and I don't know if the senior and people with disabilities folks, do they accept do they accept referrals, for instance, from EMTs, do you know?
I don't know if it's from EMTs, but they do accept referrals from caseworkers.
Yeah.
I can ask.
Because it seems to me, I mean, that's a need that was expressed to me several times by the Lewis and Clark chief EMT person. And so it seems to me that, our fire departments are not only here to put out fires, they're also great contacts with our rural residents. And so I think in that spirit, we really do. The other issue is that they have a really crazy way of assigning calls to different districts. And I think that our GIS superstars are going to be able to do a new map that's going to make all that much easier for them. So it's a great service. Thank you for the assignment.
No, I think that's, and I'm really glad that you brought that up, because, the volunteers in the fire departments, volunteer fire departments and medics as well, it's truly a calling for them to keep, pursuing that and to
it really is.
Stay so dedicated over decades.
That's right, and that's what's happening, is that now people are aging out.
So
so we've got to do something with our younger people. I was thinking that maybe for instance, we do I can't remember what it's called. Courtney, you probably know that because the EFT people do it. Like it's a career day thing that we do with high school students for jobs.
Well, they just did the job fair.
Job fair.
Yeah.
No,
really? I'm sorry. I'm stop reading.
But no, I think it's great.
But to maybe have something like opportunities for volunteering. Mm-hmm. To be at the job fair, and maybe something, for instance, at the county fair, something like that encourages people to come and, with all these, and what's interesting to me too is that so many of them have a very high percentage of women volunteers. Mm-hmm. A lot of the EMTs are women. So that's my
good news for the day.
Yeah, that's great, Commissioner Webb, and I agree, we can't, recognize the good work that they do enough, and make
Really.
sure that we do, give them that praise, and it's well-deserved. Commissioner Banks?
I wish I had good news tonight. Recently Cascades Inc. has shared, that they will be closing 2 paper facilities one in Scappoose and one in St. Helens. The St. Helens, they'll lose 88 employees, and the one in Scappoose, Scappoose is 88 employees, and St. Helens, they haven't disclosed how many employees will lose their positions there, but in the past, they've employed a little around 100 employees. And so I just think that's a huge loss, especially when we have this unemployment rate here, and just knowing that Columbia County, our neighbor, are going to be suffering job losses. And that circles into the next comment that I have this evening is my most recent CFTLC meeting with the Forest Trust Lands and Commissioner Yamamoto and State Forestry. They disclosed their AOP for the 2024, the year 2024, and that AOP is $13 million. And an annual operations,
Money.
it's the contract, it's how many acres that are going to be sold for harvest. And so their projection, for us is around $13 million, as a county to receive. And in the past, I think our 10-year average is $23 million. I'm not sure, but it's around $23 million is our 10-year average, or 15-year average. And so that's a pretty steep projection for us fiscally. Now, granted, that financial cliff won't hit us immediately because with all AOPs, contracts are open for 3 years in the forest industry. And so it doesn't mean that they have to be harvested in the year of sale. It just means that it has to be harvested within 3 years of sale. And so they have that operations window. And so we'll still be receiving the fiscal benefits of sales 2 years ago and 3 years ago. But we won't, so it won't hit us next year, but it'll hit us in 2026. So I'm just putting that out there that it's going to be our projected new normal, and it's a little disheartening, especially with Cascade Inc.'s most recent news, and I guess you could say my biggest fears. So anyhow, sorry, it's not good news, folks.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Banks. I happened to see the city manager of St. Helens and heard the news from him yesterday, so.
Yeah, they released it yesterday.
Yeah.
So.
Commissioner Thompson?
Well, to continue the theme, yesterday the District 4 commissioners got together and Commissioner Magruder was sharing that news with us. What we talked about was the fact that as District 7, which you'll remember is Columbia, Clatsop, Tillamook, and Western Washington County, and Lincoln County. Colpack is not Lincoln County, but Western Washington County. So, but Columbia, Clatsop, Tillamook always in the mix. What we're looking at is the cumulative detrimental impact of environmental legislation, either through the courts or the FEMA BIOP or whatever, that impacts our capacity to economically support our communities. We're constantly playing catch up, and the problem is, as well-meaning and as essential as it is to want to heal the planet, if we don't have an economy that works, if we don't have businesses that can operate, we have no tax dollars, and then we can have no tax services, public safety, education, healthcare, everything. Everything depends on the ability of a business to operate successfully here. How do we do that? I had a friend who talked to me about a conversation with an environmentalist organization, an NGO staffer, talking about the Habitat Conservation Plan. And the idea was that somehow there would be replacement revenue So if Commissioner Quilla, if you have a dollar bill, and I take that dollar bill and I give you 65 cents back, and then I say, well, I can replace it with, I don't know, a couple of pennies or maybe a nickel, if and when I feel like it, does that make you whole? The answer is no, it does not make you whole.
Makes me mad.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, there's a form of magical thinking that says money will magically appear from the general fund or some place that will replace the natural resources industry, farming, forestry, timber. I don't see it. I don't see economists telling me it will happen. The lag time, that 3-year period of time, that means we're on the Titanic. We can see the iceberg and we're headed for it. So is there time to shift? Because it is like a ship. It takes a while. And there is community consternation. Again, we are all committed to healing the planet. And if we don't have an economy that works, we have no services and we don't have a livable community. So that's my rant. Looking to have a new executive director of Colpack area in Columbus, going back to graduate school. She's brilliant. We're looking for somebody who can manage the three-legged stool of government, economic development and enhancement, and the NGOs, because the NGOs have a mission that's focused on healing the planet, which I really support, always, now and forever. And it has to be not just that, but also the economy, so that we have services for everybody. Otherwise, we have no civilization. That's a little dramatic, but not too much. All right. So, fire districts. I have 4 of them in my district. Hamlet has no paid staff. Elsie Vine Maple has they're all in trouble. What I want to see is the sheriff in front of us talking about law enforcement in Clatsop County. I want to see the Fire Defense Board in front of us talking about the state of the fire districts, because as you point out, they're essential for fire protection, they're essential for emergency medical services, and they're essential to, again, maintain the fabric of the community. So I want to have them reporting to us so that we get not just scattershot, but we have, what's your favorite phrase? A process, coherent muscle movement. I want to use all my...
Coordinated muscle movement.
Coordinated muscle movement. Okay, so yes, that's the concept. That's what we need to have in regard to these essential services. So that's my opinion. I have a bruise on my hand because I spent last Friday doing first aid and CPR on dummies of people in the adults were easier than the kids. Those babies are really hard to do. But it was good because it was Cannon Beach Rural Fire Protection District and the Cannon Beach Community Emergency Response Team acting together all day long to refresh our CPR and first aid skills. Excellent, excellent. Everybody can join CERT. Everybody can get a ham radio license. The Medical Reserve Corps can always use people. This whole fabric of community, and how do we make it possible to help take care of each other? That's the deal. Then Saturday, there was a meeting of the Arch Cape Forest. I have a map. I'm not afraid to show it. They did something that was brilliant. You remember, colleagues, we gave them $250,000 several years ago. Some people had heartburn about that. It came at an essential time to help that water district demonstrate community support so that they could get other much greater multi-million-dollar federal funding to buy their watershed so that it can deal with, again, a healthy planet, so they can help protect the water sources, wildlife habitat, all of the plant life, and community access. Now, the rub comes in defining community. because there were some community members who were concerned about what if this became yet another tourist destination. So there was community heartburn there about that. The water district there did a brilliant thing and brought in facilitators who did a lot of listening and assured the community members that it would not be marketed as another park, so that it could have a manageable load on the landscape. There's more, but that's enough for now. I'm headed to the Local Government Advisory Committee, which you'll remember is the entity that is looking to redefine the relationship of the counties and, I would say, the state bureaucracies. To Commissioner Toyoka's point, that bill that said if you've got a problem with gun stuff, I'm paraphrasing, right? You have to take it to the only district court in Oregon, to only one. Now, I believe in gun control because too many people in my family have died from guns. I mean, it breaks my heart. But I think legally, it is not a good idea. Legally, if we confine our opposition simply to the limitation of that one circuit court, I'm willing to support it. If we go beyond that, I can't. But if we stick to that, what I think is an unreasonable restriction on the right to legal redress, I'm with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. And I know we mentioned a number of items, Habitat Conservation Plan and FEMA buy-up, and I know that HCP we've watched so closely because it impacts all of our special districts, Class of Care District being one of them. That's going to feel the pinch if that goes forward. But yesterday, the League of Oregon Cities is meeting in Seaside this week, and their conference is in Seaside. I was actually invited to come speak to the group with the focus on water infrastructure, aging water infrastructure, and tide gates and levees and all that. And I do think it would be great to have Justin Gibbs on the agenda soon, and we can talk a little bit more about our levees and floodplain issues, and of course our aging infrastructure that we deal with. But of course, it got to the FEMA buy-up and how this is really, the elephant in the room about how it's going to impact all development in a floodplain. And again, the floodplain can be equal to the flood water of the Columbia River, even though you've got a levee there that's been there for 90 years, keeping areas protected from flooding. But that's obviously a big issue, and we've submitted our public comment. I know that it closes next week. I hope that there will be a lot of public comment that's received, and then we'll have to think twice about going forward on the timeline that they were proposing, because it's just like the Habitat Conservation Plan. It's out of litigation. They're just pushing it off to the local and rural communities to deal with it from a federal and state issue, and that's something that we're not equipped to do. We need a little bit of time to work with our community, and certainly we need a little relief when it comes to all of these natural resource issues that have become a real squeeze and a real dominating so much of our time and effort here at our local government. So anyway, I'll go ahead and turn over to County Manager.
Before you do so,
Commissioner Banks.
Commissioner Thompson, the question?
Yes.
Okay. So it's just in regards to the Arch Cape Water District, the watershed there. So in their original forest management plan, they had a conversation, or it was written in there that the watershed itself would be closed to the public. Was there clarification on whether or not that it's going to be closed to the public, or if there's open access?
I tell you what, let's have them come and talk to us.
I'd love it. I think that'd be a great idea.
We gave them money, they should come and talk to us. We paid the cost to be, if not the boss, at least someone who gets a report.
Amen. Thank you.
I agree. Our agendas are getting fuller.
Yeah.
County Manager.
Running out of ink. And more meetings. Chair Quayla, members of the board, good evening. I'll just go through a quick list of things, and then if you have any questions for me, feel free. The first is, we talked a little bit about fire, this evening, and, I mentioned this at the last board meeting, but I will be meeting with the Fire Defense Board on May 24th. I've asked, the sheriff and Justin Gibbs to join me, and so the three of us will be talking to the fire chiefs. What I was thinking is that after that meeting, I'll invite the fire chiefs and the sheriffs to come and talk to the board in a work session so that we can have, I think having this first meeting will be a good segue into broader discussions. I think I shared the list of the topics, and they include the ambulance issues, they include 911 dispatch issues, it includes the challenges of funding rural fire authorities and staffing them. And so there's a lot to really talk about, and I could go into my whole spiel about that right now, but I won't. I'll save that for another day. Another is the BIOP letter. We haven't actually submitted that yet. I'm just waiting to hear from a couple commissioners. So if you haven't responded, if you could, and we'll submit that tomorrow if we hear. But there was a BIOP draft letter that was sent, and I don't think there's any concerns, but I just want to make sure the board is on board.
Yep.
And then I am drafting another HCP letter. I just think it's important to keep it on everybody's radar screen. So I'm working on that. It might be early next week by the time that I get it done, but I'll share it with the board. It's really the same concerns, only my concerns continue to grow as I see what the actual impacts may be. And what I will say is that if it was just the HCP in a vacuum, that would be one thing, but it's never that. It's HCP, it's BIOP, it's the fact that there are additional mandates that are coming down to local governments that are unfunded. It's just, and then you have things like fire districts that aren't going to be long-term viable. And when you look at all these issues, they all touch the county at some level. And so, we're not at a place right now where less revenue is going to be a good thing. Replacement revenue is not a thing. And so I just think, all of us should really be concerned about what that HCP means on the revenue side. I've never weighed in on the science side, and I think the board's been very clear that they support an HCP, but my feeling is just we need to have the right balance that looks at the economic, the environmental, and the social implications at the same time. Because our financial picture will be, it'll be less than ideal.
Yeah.
So, another is the Columbia Inn, just a quick update that we are working diligently on some of the tenant improvements, replacing floors, installing fire alarms, fire sprinklers, working with the operators. And so that's all coming. If things go well, which they don't always, but we're always optimistic and hopeful, June 1st roughly is when we hope to see that facility open and start accepting residents. I'm also, after the decision on the NOHA and the ARPA funding, I've been working with our human resources department to pivot and to create a classification for a housing staff member that will be part of my office. And so we are working with that, and I will be talking to your board individually as I work through some of the final details, and then I'll come to a work session in the next couple weeks and have a more public discussion about that. And then Friday, I'm planning to drive to Bend and see my son. So he actually just asked me to bring him some stuff. So I'm just a courier, but that's okay. I'll take it.
Laundry, right?
That could happen. So thank you.
Yeah. Safe travels.
Thank you.
All right, before we move on to the business agenda, I'll give everybody an opportunity to you can leave now if you want to. Mike, Rick. We're going to be moving on to the business agenda. But I want to say thank you so much for being here this evening, and thank you for leaving material on the measure 4-223. So important to vote in favor of that and to support Clatsop Care District.
I just want to recognize that some of the people in the audience are here by choice, I'm sure, but also, they're walking out now. They're not staying for the whole meeting. Students from the high school.
Welcome. Bye.
Commissioner Cuella gave them an out.
I gave them the out they needed.
Some people were required to be here. I would also just like to add, you all should have your budget document if you chose to receive it by hard copy, and then, if not, you should have received all the email links and everything like that. So those are now out to the public. They're available in the libraries as well.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Monica Steele.
Assistant County Manager Monica Steele, and I'm here tonight to talk to you all about issuing a quitclaim deed to the city of Warrenton for some surplus land. And as you can see on this map in front of you, this is pretty much a road in the city of Warrenton. It is a public road it's a public road. It's on county property that went through a foreclosure process. And so the city is asking that it be deeded over to them because they've received some complaints about abandoned vehicles not going anywhere. And since it is just county property, it is looked at like private property. And so therefore the City of Warrenton Police can't do anything about enforcing that those be towed. So we're just coming before your board to ask that this be deeded over to the City of Warrenton, and then that way they can take it into their city road system.
Okay,
Is that a question?
okay. Commissioner Toyoka?
With that property, does it require any kind of, access easement or anything like that as we transfer it for the homeowners that have homes off that road? The properties overlapping.
So, this was all part of a development that was happening, and there was a step that didn't, happen, while the development was taking place. And then the Assessment and Tax Director, Suzanne Johnson, can also speak to this as well. But then the property before it was, completed, before the development was completed, the property was foreclosed upon, and so then it goes back to the county. So the whole process wasn't completed. It is necessary for this street, for, as you can see, it extends beyond. It does have a dead end, but there are houses on the west side of the road, just past where our lot is. So it is necessary for these homeowners to be able to access it. They do have an easement right. Yes, they do have an easement right. So even with the transfer of this, nothing would change there.
Okay, that was my question.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it.
Oh, it's your district.
What's that?
Fine,
Do your thing.
go ahead.
Do you need a motion?
Yeah.
We need a
Okay.
motion.
I move to authorize the chair to sign the quick claim deed releasing all of its right, title, and interest in tax lot 81021AC00601 as described in Exhibit A.
Second that.
Move to second to authorize the chair to sign the quitclaim deed, releasing all of its right, title, and interest in tax lot 81021AC00601 as described in Exhibit A. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. We'll move on to the public hearing this evening. Public hearing is on ordinance 23-01, Law Duck revisions, trucking terminal, and rural community commercial zone. Page 69 of the agenda, and Planning Manager Julia Decker is our presenter.
Good evening, Commissioners and Chair Aquila. Yes, Julia Decker, Planning Manager, Community Development. Very briefly, this is your second reading. Your first reading was April 12th, and that was for ordinance 2301, and this would add a definition of trucking terminal to the Land and Water Development and Use Code, and then also add that as a use, a Type 2 use, to the rural community commercial zone. Since your first reading, we have received no comment whatsoever. I don't know if anyone has heard anything, any of you commissioners I know Commissioner Thompson mentioned something at the first reading that she had heard from someone. I tried to add some more material into this agenda summary so that you could see why a type 2 is not just a slam dunk over-the-counter thing. But still, we've not received any comments. You have the language, you have the section of code. I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you, Julia. So since this is a continuation of public hearing ordinance 23-01, a lot of revisions, can we have the second reading by title only, County Council?
Yes, this is ordinance number 23-01, in the matter of an ordinance amending the Land and Water Development and Use Code, LAWDUC, adding a definition of trucking terminal and adding trucking terminals as a conditional use in the RCC zone.
Thank you, County Council. Clerk of the Board, are there any members of the public that have signed up to speak?
No, there are not.
Okay. Well, then we'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time. Do we have any discussion? Ready for a motion? Oh, discussion?
I just have heard nothing from, people,
Okay.
and I hear about a lot of things from a lot of people, so I take that as a good sign.
I
Thank
love
you,
that.
staff.
Great. Good. Okay, do we have a motion?
I move to approve ordinance 2301.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve ordinance 23-01. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank
Thank you,
Julianne.
everyone.
Thanks for all your hard work on this.
You are most welcome.
Okay, that's all we have on the agenda. So, we have County Manager.
Chair Quilla, members of the board, just a reminder that if we can go into executive session for a few minutes after the meeting.
Okay, excellent. We can do that. Anything for the good of the order? Okay, we'll go ahead.